Hello, and welcome back to Through the Cycles with Deanna. I am your host, Deanna, and I think we're going to get right into today's episode. I want to talk about how birth control ruined my life. This episode is for the girls who have been on birth control, for the girls who are on birth control, for the girls. I'm going to talk about my experience with it, how long I was on the pill, my journey getting off the pill, why I went on the pill. I truly feel that birth control ruined majority of my teenage years, and I know a lot of people can relate to that, or maybe feel like they're on the pill currently and they're kind of trying to get off of it because they don't really like the way it makes their body feel or their mind feel. So this is just my experience. I went on birth control when I was 15 years old. And the initial conversation around going on birth control for me was my acne. And if you've ever been 15 before, you kind of get acne when you go through puberty. And my acne wasn't like bad. It was just regular teenage acne. I didn't have like big cystic acne at that point in my life. I really just had like tiny little bumps on my forehead, tiny little bumps on my chest, just like generic teenage pimples. But the conversation with my dermatologist, I was very adamant about clearing this acne up, as any teenage girl would be. And she was like, "Oh, well, have you been to the gynecologist yet?" And I was like, "No." My mom's ears kind of perked up, being that I just started dating a boy and he was coming over my house a lot. And I think maybe at the time my mom was like, maybe she should go to a gynecologist. Maybe birth control would work for her skin, right? But it would also be protective against unprotected sex or any kind of sex, just as like a double precaution. So that's what we did. We went to the gynecologist and they gave that shit out like it was water. I mean, they do give that shit out like it's water. And now that I look back on the situation, it's really sad to see how easily doctors give out birth control to girls of all ages, from all different backgrounds, from all different circumstances. It doesn't even really matter the reason. If you mention birth control, they will give it to you. And I do feel like that is part of the problem. But I'll get into my experience with my gynecologist much later in the story. So I was 15. I went to the gynecologist. I talked about my acne. She asked if I was having sex. I said yes. And that was that. The next thing I knew, 3 days later, I picked my pill up from the pharmacy and I started taking that pill every single day. If you're not familiar with birth control, or if you've never been on birth control, you take birth control once a day, the same time every day. I had never taken pills in my life before or been on any sort of supplement or medication. So taking a pill at the same time every day, remembering to take a pill at the same time every day, left me with this kind of like daunting responsibility. And maybe I didn't understand how serious that was at the time, but I was 15 and you don't really have any concept of responsibility when you're 15. At least I didn't. So pretty much immediately after starting the pill, I felt different. I couldn't quite pinpoint what the difference was, but something inside of me started to change. I felt this burning rage, this deep sadness and despair and hopelessness. I didn't relate it to the pill. It didn't even cross my mind. I lacked so much self-awareness as a teenager that it wasn't something that I even thought could be possible. So I kept taking this pill, kept taking this pill, kept taking this pill. And eventually it actually led to the breakup between that boyfriend I had when I was 15, which is why I started going on the pill. I became so irritable in my life and so mean that I would sort of take it out on him, or I would maybe react to things much more dramatically than my natural reaction would be. I was hyper sensitive. Any insecurity in my brain was turned up to 1,000. Any fear in my brain was turned up to 1,000. Any sadness in my brain was turned up to 1,000. Any negative emotion I felt, that pill went into my body, into my brain, and cranked that shit up on full max. As a teenager going through puberty, it is already a very trying time to exist in your body, feel those hormonal changes, feel the life changes, feel your social circle change every second. It's overwhelming. So that mixed with starting birth control was a recipe for disaster. So me and that boy break up, and I stay on birth control. You're supposed to stay on it, blah, blah, blah. Fast forward to maybe like 2 years later. I was probably 17 when I started to correlate the way I was feeling with the pill. And I started to wake up to, this thing I put inside me every day literally turns me into a different person. It got to the point where I could feel the shift. Like I mentioned, you take it at the same time every day. So let's say I took it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, right? So I take it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then come 2 p.m. the next day, I could almost feel it wearing off. And then as soon as I would take it at 3 o'clock again, it was like, oh, here we go again. Here we go. Start the engine back up. I became so hyper aware of it existing in my body that I would actually refer to it as the Satan pill. I called it that with my friends. I called it that with every boyfriend I had. Every time my timer would go off on my phone, I would say, oh, it's time to take the Satan pill. Oh, I have to take my Satan pill. Oh, I forgot my Satan pill. And actually, now that I say that out loud, I was projecting that energy into the pill, to which I then put inside of my body. I was projecting that evil, sadistic energy into this pill, which I had felt had already existed in this pill, but I was perpetuating more of that negative, sadistic energy. So I kept taking the Satan pill. I kept referring to it as the Satan pill. And when you're on birth control, you go back to your gynecologist every 6 months to check in with them. So 17, I go back for another one of those routine 6-month check just so they can pretty much refill that prescription. And I sat down with my gynecologist and she asked the same routine questions. How have you been feeling? How's life going? Blah, blah, blah. And so I sat with her and I said, I think the pill makes me not want to be here. And you know what she said back to me? Why don't we try a different one? And that was the end of the beginning. If I didn't think that it could get any worse, it got worse. And I listened because I was a kid and I don't know. And I have a doctor sitting in front of me. I'm going to listen to my doctor. I'm going to trust that my doctor has my best interest at heart. Now, with that being said, looking back on the situation at almost 24 years old, in no world should a person sit down, look their doctor in the eye, and say, this pill makes me not want to be here anymore. And then that doctor says, let's try a different one. Same thing, same birth control, a different pill. And the journey began. She put me on a different pill. I was on it for a month. They run on a month cycle. I was on it for a month, hated it. Called her up, said I hate it. She gave me a different pill. She kept prescribing me different brands of birth control like I was a guinea pig. That's how I felt. I felt like I was a test rat. And it was like, oh, let's try this one. Oh, now let's try this one. It's like, oh, do you want to kill yourself yet? No. Are you a little bit sadder here? It's like, oh, how dark can those thoughts get? Let's try it on this pill. Maybe let's try it on this pill. Are they a little bit less dark? But that wasn't the dialogue back and forth between us. It wasn't, how is this pill making you feel? Do you feel less suicidal? That wasn't the conversation. It was happening over the phone, and it was me reaching out to the office, not even talking to my doctor, talking to the receptionist, and they would just send in a new prescription, send in a new prescription, send in a new prescription. And I was losing my fucking mind. Now, through this process, I am getting more and more fed up with life, with myself, with the medical system. There were moments, there were months that I would just stop taking the pill altogether. If I knew in my life that I wasn't actively having sex, I would stop taking the pill. And you can't really do that with the pill. It's sort of something that you have to stay on for it to stay in your system. You can't come on and off the pill. And I didn't realize I was completely fucking my body up. I was fucking my mind up even worse. But I was also so terrified to have unprotected sex that I would take the pill when I was having sex, and I wouldn't take the pill when I wasn't having sex. That's not how that works. So don't do that, because it's not smart, and it's very unsafe, and it's really not good for your body. That was what I did when I was a teenager, and I had no idea what I was doing or what to do or who to ask. Going on and off the pill was not good for me. However, I do want to talk about the feelings associated with being on the pill. And this is completely my experience and the things that I felt. Like I was talking about earlier, where it kind of went into my brain and just ramped up every negative emotion. I do believe that I can run sad, but it took that sadness and it fucking launched it 1,000 times further than it should have gone. It made me have such irrational thoughts that were scary. Some of them being, and trigger warning if you're sensitive to suicidal ideation, just a fair warning. If you don't want to keep listening, just skip ahead a couple of minutes. I would drive my car and I would think, shut your eyes. Close your eyes for a little bit. What? Close your eyes while you're driving? That's fucking crazy. Or I would be, me and my friends used to go hang out on top of like a big parking garage. We would like park our car and hang out up there and like smoke weed and listen to music. And the thought would be like, oh, we're all hanging out like by the edge, like it would be like, oh, you should get up on top and jump off. Just fucking dark, random things. And like, listen, everybody has intrusive thoughts, right? Like sometimes they get weird, sometimes they're really dark, and that's normal. These were not normal, intrusive human thoughts. They were constant, they were dark, and I had to come in and say no. I had to come in and have a strong enough consciousness to fight it. It was like truly like devil and angel constantly battling inside me, and that fucking devil was the Satan pill. And I believe that wholeheartedly. I mean, I went through emotional issues as a teenager, like every single teenager does, but the pill heightened that. The pill made me feel things that I probably wouldn't have felt if I hadn't been on it since I was 15. All I want to say is that if you are on the pill and you feel like any part of you, any part of your body, any part of your mind, any part of your soul is rejecting that pill, look into it. Look into it, because it's got to be for a reason. And going off of the pill was the best decision I have ever made. I went off the pill when I was 21. So I was on the pill for 6 years. My decision to finally go off the pill, what finally did it for me, because I had went back and forth for so long. I mean, I would stop it. I would start it again. I would stop it. I would start it again. What finally drove me to it was college. And I sat down with myself and I said, why am I on this? Why? Like, what really is the reason? And the only reason for me was sex. I didn't want to or feel comfortable asking the guy I was with to wear a condom. And I also didn't trust a guy really at all to understand where I was coming from in the contraceptive department. And most guys at that point in my life that I had had sexual experiences with, they didn't care to put a condom on. And they didn't really care to ask you about your feelings on birth control and contraceptive and whatever. So that was just my experience with who I was with and had been with. They were not very involved in the contraceptive talk. It was pretty much like, you on the pill? Great. So that was my reason. I had narrowed it down to the sole reason I was on the pill was for sex. And at that point in my life, I was pretty damn done with having sex. I just turned 21. It's my sophomore year of college. And the game in college is weird. And I didn't like it. And I was kind of like, I don't want to have sex with anybody. And I don't want to be on this pill. So I'm going to stop taking the pill and I'm going to go celibate. And that was what I did. And wow, was it fucking freeing. And coming off of the pill, I dedicated time and energy and research into the female body. Now, the research done around it, I took a very holistic approach and I read everything that has been written by a woman. A lot of our modern medicine has come from men and has been studied on male bodies. A lot of it has not been studied on female bodies. And the research that has been done on female bodies has been done by a man. I wasn't fucking with it. I clearly wasn't fucking with the system that put me on the pill over and over and over again when I had told them that I was suicidal, right? So I was not fucking with the system. I turned to alternative medicine and dove headfirst into the female body and how it works. I got a hormone test. My hormones came back and they were all over the fucking place. They were all over the place because I had been on birth control for 6 years. So that led me into discovering the 4 phases of your cycle. Now stay with me. It gets a little bit confusing. I like to think of them as 4 seasons, but it's 4 phases that you go through over that 28 to 30 days. Everybody's cycle varies, 25 to 30 days. I run on a 28-day cycle. So you have your menstrual phase, your luteal phase, your ovulation, and your follicular phase. So just to touch on what that even means, let's start with your menstrual phase. Your menstrual phase is about 3 to 7 days. It's your period. It's the time that you're bleeding, right? I like to think of this as my winter. I want to hibernate. I want to be warm. I want to eat soup. I want lower impact exercise, if not no exercise at all. I am irritable. I'm sad. I'm moody. I maybe don't want to socialize that much. These are things that ring in truth for me. A lot of them can be true for you too. Typically, if you have a steady, healthy hormone, you will experience these sort of highs and lows steadily throughout your cycle. So then after your menstrual phase, you have your follicular phase. The follicular phase, I like to think of as my inner spring. I'm just starting to wake up again from hibernation. The flower starts to open. I'm feeling energized. I'm feeling rejuvenated. It's like I went through a rebirth. Maybe I want to have more conversation with my friends. Maybe I want to go out more. Maybe I'm feeling really inspired and creative. This phase is you coming out of your menstruation. You're coming back up again, right? You have that renewed sense of energy coming out of menstruation into the follicular phase. And then we go into your ovulatory phase when you're ovulating. If you didn't know, because I didn't know, as a female, you are only fertile 5 days out of your cycle. So that's 5 days out of 28 days of my cycle that I'm fertile. You are fertile the day you ovulate, 2 days before that, and 2 days after that. So if you ovulate, I'll make this very easy for you. If you ovulate on the 14th of the month, you are fertile the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th. And then that 14th day would be your ovulation. The reason that you are fertile the first 2 days before and the first 2 days after is because sperm can live inside you up to 72 hours. So if you had sperm inside you on that day 12, but you don't ovulate until day 14, you see what I'm saying? You're still fertile. And then vice versa. So that's why you allot those 2 extra days before and after, giving you that 5-day total. Now, when you're in your ovulation phase, God, do you feel good? I feel fucking good. I feel confident. I feel happy. I feel goofy. I feel very sexy and very turned on. Not even sexually, just like with life. I have this like sexiness for the world around me, and I fucking love when I'm ovulating. And that's the time when you can get pregnant. And then you move into your luteal phase. Your luteal phase is the longest phase of your cycle. The first half of your luteal phase is pretty neutral. You have like neutral mood. You're not like overly happy or overly irritable. You're just kind of like good. You just feel really good and strong and productive. And then that second half of your luteal phase, your body starts to prepare again for menstruation. So you go right into the luteal phase, right into that menstruation. So for me, cycle day 22, I typically start bleeding 28. So cycle day 21, 22, I get sore breasts. I have a little bit of tightness in my low back. I maybe get super sad for no reason. Those sort of things. Oh, and I forgot to mention that ovulation is the summer, right? We went from spring to summer, and then that follicular phase is your fall. So you see how they all kind of follow each other and then bleed into each other. And if you think of the seasons, in your head, you can sort of understand the emotion associated with that season and where you're kind of at mentally coinciding with your cycle. So those are your 4 phases. With a lot of practice, a lot of patience, I started tracking my cycle Every day, I got a big calendar on my desk. This is after I stopped taking birth control. Every day, I would write down how I was feeling, right? Just like a couple bullet points: sad, irritable, tired. And then eventually I started color coding it to track what phase of the cycle I was in. And I was able to track when I was ovulating. I was able to get comfortable with my body. I grew this like beautiful, beautiful relationship back with my female body, with my uterus, that I was able to take control back enough to feel my body change, honor the changes that my body goes through, and work with it. I worked out differently. I ate differently according to my cycle. And I can do a whole episode on the different kinds of food I eat depending on my cycle, the different types of exercise I do depending on my cycle, my day-to-day depending on my cycle. Because now, after having that experience with birth control and feeling like I was stripped of my womanhood, I live by my cycle. And it has changed my life. I have never felt better inside of my body. I've never felt healthier. I've never felt stronger. And I've never felt more feminine. To honor your cycle is a beautiful thing. And coming back to the birth control, if it's about sex, and if you don't want to have unprotected sex, or if you don't want to have the conversation with your partner or who you're casually having sex with because you don't trust them or because it's awkward, you'll find the right person for you. I live now, like I mentioned, I live now by my cycle, and I have 5 days out of the month that I know I'm fertile, that I have had multiple conversations with my partner about. These 5 days we need to use protection, or these 5 days we don't have sex, or these 5 days we don't have penetrative sex, right? But I have now been lucky enough that I'm with a person who not only accepts that, but he also honors my cycle, knows what phase I'm in. And it's like a really beautiful thing, that he's able to be like, oh, you're ovulating soon, let's go get some condoms. Or like, oh, you need an extra hug. I can tell you're going to get your period soon. And it's not degrading. It's not belittling. It's just a place of love. It's just understanding your female partner and helping them be the best version of themselves. Because I had mentioned in the other podcast episode, and just a friendly reminder, as women, the feminine energy is represented by the moon. The moon runs on a 30-day cycle, just like us, right? We're different every day. We show up differently every day, just like the moon in the sky. The sun, represented by the masculine energy, runs on a 24-hour cycle, just like the male hormonal cycle. The sun comes up, the sun goes down. It's the same every single day. So just the feminine principle of the moon and the masculine principle of the sun, biologically, we run differently than men, but we do live in a man's world. So navigating being a woman, honoring your cycle in a man's world is a very hard thing to do, but it is possible. And you need to give yourself grace, and you need to take a moment if you need to take a moment. And trust that you will attract in a partner that will love and honor you and your cycle exactly the way it is, because it's a fucking magical thing. So I think that's all I got. That was my story on how birth control ruined my life. And I'm sure you guys have stories about how birth control ruined your life. Comment down below your experience with birth control, if you love it, if you hate it, if you agree, if you disagree, whatever you're feeling, whatever you want to say, comment down below. I'm open to hearing what you guys have to say. And let's keep this conversation going. Let's keep this dialogue open. I think this is a really important conversation that not a lot of people talk about. So yeah, I wanted to dive in head first because It's a crazy world out there, and we got to protect each other. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for listening. If you've made it this far, I appreciate you. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day, and I will talk to you guys next week.